Hey there, my loves. Today, we are diving into something crucial for your business's future, the Corporate Transparency Act. What's that, you ask? Well, this is a law that impacts millions of small businesses, including yours, with a new requirement to report ownership details to the federal government. Compliance is no longer optional, it's essential, with serious penalties for being non compliant. Now, as a member of the board of directors for the National Small Business Association, this is a critical issue that I know you need to be aware of. And I know just how critical it is to understand policies like this one and so many more. And to help us break down the CTA and how it impacts your businesses, I'm joined today by Reed Westcott from my organization, the NSBA. Together, we'll cover everything you need to know, from who's affected to what you need to do right now to stay compliant. So let's get to work. All right, guys, welcome to CPTV. And I am so excited to have with us in the studio today Mr. Reed Westcott from the National Small Business Association. He is the Senior Director of Government Affairs and Federal Policy to talk to us today about this all-important topic. Welcome, Reed.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. It's a pleasure to be here with you today.
I'm so excited that you were able to join me. I just love whenever we get a chance to spend some time together. And both you and I discussed, how important it is for people to be aware of what's going on, especially entrepreneurs, and my favorite CPTVers. So I cannot wait to dive into some of these topics because I am sure that your life and your role has been a little nuts in 2024 so far.
Been a productive year for sure.
Productive. I love that word. That's right. Keep it positive, Reed. That's the energy I always get from you, which I
Always keep it
absolutely
moving.
love. So thank you for taking the time out to join me today. We've got some good stuff to talk about that I think so many of my audience and so many folks out there who are entrepreneurs, even if they aren't really truly active and they're doing them as side hustles, but they've got these organizations formed, need to be aware of. And I think that sometimes we get so caught up in the day to day of operating in our businesses and trying to grow them and trying to do stuff with them that public policy and laws and all that kind of stuff kind of falls to the wayside. And this particular topic, these particular topics actually that we're going to talk about today, I think should be brought to the forefront because they are going to affect every single entrepreneur out there. And I think that it's just a precursor to why it's so important for us as small business owners to not just focus on the day-to-day of our operations, but to be aware of the ecosystem, especially surrounding public policy federally, statewide, locally, becomes so important to what we've got to add to our plates every day. So I just want to say, you are the man in the knowledge. We just spent some time together really in DC. Hopefully everybody who follows me on Instagram, you saw the stories. Reed was at the core of bringing all of that good stuff to you guys. And so I really wanted to get started with this Corporate Transparency Act thing.
Mhm.
We've been talking about it for a long time, me being a board member for the NSBA and obviously you being on the leadership team there. You guys have been dealing with this for quite a bit of time, and the NSBA has really taken a lead role in helping to prevent this from impacting so many of us. But the time is upon us, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So let me just start off by saying, first of all, you are far too kind. Thank you again for having me in today. It's an absolute pleasure to be here with you and to be with your folks here today. And I also want to give credit where credit's due. We could not do what we do without the leadership of you and the folks on our board who are really making sure that we are responsive to the needs of small business owners across the country and that what we're doing here in DC really does have that impact, really matters to folks on a day-to-day basis. So thank you for all of your hard work. You really keep us moving here in DC. So we appreciate that. Uh,
Oh, thank you.
Moving on to the core issue here. So the Corporate Transparency Act is a huge thing that I think not a lot of folks really understand, or if they do understand it, they might not necessarily get all the nuance of it. This is this huge reporting burden that we're expecting to affect almost all small business owners as of the end of this calendar year. It's already kicked in for some, and it'll kick in for the rest at the end of this calendar year. So basically what this is for folks who might not be aware, back a few years ago during COVID, as part of one of the National Defense Authorization Acts, which is a bill that funds the government defense. They put a provision in there to combat money laundering called the Corporate Transparency Act. This provision empowers a division of the Treasury Department called the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, or FinCEN, to collect information from specifically small business owners. So basically just folks who have businesses with 20 or fewer employees and $5 million or less in gross receipts or sales. These folks are going to have to report information into FinCEN about who their beneficial owners are. That's a really broadly defined term. I know it probably sounds a little bit confusing right off the bat. That's because it is. As far as we can tell, folks don't really have a good handle on what exactly that means, kind of how we're supposed to interpret that. It could be really, really broad. It could be really, really tailored, and we're trying to get some guidance from folks in the government about what specifically that means. But right now, we are taking it to mean that anybody who exerts any form of substantial control over your business operation, so could be anyone from the folks giving you consulting advice on the new markets you want to enter, new strategies you want to undertake, all the way down to your spouse. If you're talking business, talking shop at the dinner table, that could be technically a beneficial ownership arrangement, and that might be the kind of thing that needs to be reported. So we're just waiting for some clarity on that from folks. But right now it's a really, really broad application. Happy to get into more specifics here, but hopefully that's a kind of good top level overview for folks.
That was amazing. I mean, I think that as we were roaming the halls of the Capitol when I was with you a few weeks ago, really tapping into a lot of our legislatures and trying to, tell them this is insane. It's going to literally put so much burden. And a lot of the conversation that came up was, how it actually got through, which in itself is an issue, right? It was like kind of like in the dead of night, it was like added in to something else, and all of a sudden it was passed, and it's really going to put a burden on us because, like you said, it could mean, like, I have a business operations manager who kind of helps me make strategies and key decisions around our products, our services, how they get set up. I would have to report on her. I'd have to report on my husband, who, I run things by. I sort of feel like I've started using ChatGPT as like a brainstorming buddy. Well, I have to like get insight into OpenAI and report on that. I mean, it is that cryptic what exactly that means. And I think that's one of the biggest problems, with this particular bill and law. And also, not to mention the deadlines that are related to it and the penalties, because you said something really interesting. And I think the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. So when you start to talk about the title of something that can kind of give you the willies and make you like shiver, every single time you mention FinCEN to me, I get like a little stressed out because it has the word crimes in it. And that's exactly what this bill law is going to insinuate and going to have come forward. So talk a little bit about the deadlines, the compliance penalties the non-compliance penalties, and what that ultimately means, and why FinCEN is even involved in this whole thing.
Yeah, happy to. So I completely understand. FinCEN is a really scary concept. I can imagine getting a piece of mail that says Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. You immediately go to, oh my God, I'm doing everything I can to keep my business running, keep the trains running on time, keep everything above board, and this is just coming in from the government. I don't know where this is coming from.
Really?
It's really, really concerning. We're worried that a lot of folks are going to not necessarily understand what that means. And I will say the penalties are really, really stiff for non-compliance here. Folks would be facing up to $10,000 in fines. There's up to 2 years in prison that could be attached to this. It is not an easy thing to get past there. That's a really, really concerning list of penalties. We're really concerned that is overly aggressive from the government, and that they're going to be potentially catching folks up in this who have just been doing their best to make sure they're staying above board, like I was saying, and reporting everything they need to be doing, might just not understand what they need to be doing, and that's our major concern. So it's a tough environment to be operating in, for sure.
Absolutely. And the small business owner, when we talk about the small business owner that's going to be subject to this reporting requirement, give us a little bit more insight into exactly what that means, who that is. And I think that one of the biggest topics is, as an entrepreneur myself, many of us have multiple businesses. We have multiple LLCs. We've got multiple organizations that we push. Some of them are well known, some of them we market, some of them we don't. And this is going to require us to report on every single entity, right? And I have a lot of folks in my audience who may have, real estate businesses, for instance, and they've got their businesses configured in a way where, their holdings are under different LLCs. I think that we had one of our members at our last meeting in Washington say that he has 500 entities because he owns real estate, and he's like, each one of them has its own entity for protection purposes. So he's got to do 500 reports. I mean, talk a little bit about who is responsible to do this and what it really means, especially for those who started LLCs because they had this drive, they wanted to start a business. It happened to be COVID, and they're like, oh, now's the perfect time to actually officially set up my business. And then what, right?
Yeah. So the law is very, very broad. It captures a whole cross section of folks. So like I was saying before, it is anybody with 20 or fewer employees and $5 million or less in gross receipts or sales. So that is, as you can imagine, a huge percentage of the small business space. And that's what it's designed to be. It's basically just a giant dragnet to catch as many people as they possibly can. That's why we're so worried about it. And it does apply to all of the individual companies that an individual might operate. So just because you as a business owner filed for, let's say, your main company, a holding company, whatever that might be, that doesn't mean you're necessarily covered. Every single covered entity, of which there's a list on FinCEN's website, I'll make sure that we include for your folks a good set of resources to link through to all of this so that they can check and make sure whether or not they're compliant. Basically, if you go through and you look at that and you're making sure that all of your businesses are compliant, that's fantastic. But that's what you need to be doing. Otherwise, folks are going to find themselves in trouble. I know so many entrepreneurs are serial entrepreneurs. You start with one idea, you add a second, a third, a fourth. They keep just innovating, finding new strategies, new markets to enter, new.
It's how our brains work. It's how our brains work.
And that's fantastic, and that's what we want to encourage as much as possible. But the problem here is that just adds to the complexity for folks. So we did a study, I think it was about a year ago now, on what compliance costs were going to look like for this. And we were estimating first year compliance costs were going to be about $8,000. That was what the report came back to us saying. So that's really concerning for us. And that's just from folks kind of back of the napkin math. That's not necessarily kind of taking into account all of the different operations folks have and working through those potential rosters of dozens of businesses.
Right. I mean, and when we talk about, when we talk about those operational costs, I mean, when you think about that, it's the time, right? Potentially having to outsource or get your accountant or your attorney, because I know that accountants are like, this isn't my wheelhouse. Like, I don't really do this. And then your attorney's like, sure, I charge $500 an hour. I can get it done. And it might take me 20 hours with all the businesses that you have. So exactly, it's going to impact our operational costs, our time, and it impacts the business owner that has the fewest resources in both of those areas, right? We don't want more operational costs, and we don't have the time. We are working in our businesses, we're trying to grow them, and we're trying to live our dreams. So why do you think that something like this, while it is, stressful to think about, is just a kind of a sign, a symbol of why it's so important for small business owners and entrepreneurs to be aware and stay informed on how federal changes can impact them directly? Because I think that this particular bill in itself is bringing to the forefront this conversation. And this is one of those things that flew under the radar. All of a sudden, you're responsible for it. And you might not even have any idea because advocacy isn't your thing or public policy isn't your thing. And if it doesn't affect me immediately, then I don't have to worry about it. But tell us why it's so important for us to kind of shift that mentality as a business owner, and whether we like it or not, be in a space where we are paying attention to these types of things. Because when you talk about criminal time in jail, 2 years in jail and 10 grand, that can really impact what we're able to do and how we're able to grow.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the thing I want to recognize here is that small businesses are immensely powerful. Yes, we're small, but we're mighty. And we are everywhere. We are 99.9% of all businesses in the country. That is massive. All private enterprise.
Massive.
It's an unbelievable portion of that. What I want to emphasize here for folks is that this is exactly the reason why we do need more small business owners to step up and kind of keep an eye on what's going on, not just here in Washington, but in their local communities, in their states at home, because there are opportunities like this for lawmakers to kind of pass what are ostensibly well-intentioned pieces of legislation, trying to, in this case, combat money laundering.
Right.
But don't work out right, and that folks aren't necessarily taking into account when they're crafting this legislation what the needs of small business owners are going to be, or what the considerations are for folks who are really just trying to spend every day 9 to 5, 5 sometimes 7 days a week working just to kind of keep the lights on and keep food on the table. So this is just emblematic of the fact that we do need folks to be engaged, and the more engaged we can get folks, the better we have a chance of making sure things like this don't come back down and unduly burden small business owners. So. This is just, if I could use this as a call to action, it is truly just start getting involved, find an organization, whether it's NSBA or one in your kind of local community that is really voicing the needs of small business to folks in elected office, and just do everything you can to support that, because we want to make sure that none of these laws that folks are working on do have these kind of unintentional consequences on small business owners.
Absolutely. And I think that I've learned so much by being so actively involved for years in what happens locally and what happens at our state level in Ohio. And obviously by working with NSBA and being on the board, learning so much about what the process is and how it comes about. Because yes, you're right. This was well intentioned, right? It was designed to combat money laundering, but there was a group of people up there who kind of made this call without asking anybody who actually has to do the work or who actually is in it, how this might affect them. And if our system allowed for that type of brainstorming and audience feedback, then we might not be where we are. But unfortunately, that's just not the way that it works. And so if we aren't keeping our eyes peeled and making sure that we are giving that information, that support, and actively getting involved, this is how something like this can really come into play. So I'd like to shift a little bit and talk about what are some of the practical steps that you can advise those who are watching and the entrepreneurs who this is affecting, which is, like you mentioned, everybody, really pretty much everybody. What are the steps that they can take for compliance and to mitigate those risks? What should they take? What should they do in order to comply? How should they gather, organize? And then also how the NSBA specifically, and being a member of the NSBA, can help mitigate that risk specifically.
Yeah, happy to jump in there. So the good news here, I'm going to make a slight digression kind of before we get to exactly how folks can comply, to kind of get a little bit better picture of what the compliance framework looks like right now, kind of what the paradigm we're working in is. NSBA took the initiative to sue over the constitutionality of the Corporate Transparency Act a couple years ago. We're still working through the stages of that lawsuit, but as of right now, anybody who is a member of NSBA as of March 1st of this year, 2024, is exempt from the Corporate Transparency Act. So our members as of that date are exempt and do not need to presently file anything with FinCEN or with Treasury to comply with the Corporate Transparency Act. We were very fortunate in that the federal court that heard our case really they understood our arguments. They saw a lot of the issues that we had with it. And while unfortunately the government has appealed that decision, we are still continuing to fight this, and we're going to fight it all the way to the Supreme Court if necessary, just to make sure we do what we can to protect folks. So,
and we do predict that it is going to end up going all the way to the Supreme Court. I mean,
that's what we're thinking right now.
Yeah,
so like I said, it is in federal court right now already. It's at the appellate level right now. It's not even at the introductory level of the federal court system. But we do anticipate it will get there, because both the government and we are very, very resolute in our desire to kind of continue pushing this and making sure that there is some finality to the resolution here. Also working in our favor, we've started to get a lot of support as we've kind of worked through the system here. So initially it was just NSBA kind of taking the flag and running out trying to say, hey, we got a problem here. But we're building a huge coalition of support both in DC and around the country. There are now similar suits popping up around the country that have made similar claims to what we have discussed in ours. In our appeals filing here for our case, we actually had an amicus brief that was filed by 22 states attorneys general. So we're really starting to get a lot of attention and a lot of support from folks across the country on this. And so we're very, very happy to be moving that direction. But we just want to say that right now, NSBA members, again, as of March 1st of this year, are exempt from filing. Hopefully that will continue to expand as we work through the process and we can get that to include all small business owners, but that's just worth folks knowing.
Right.
Beyond that, moving to that compliance piece you want to talk about here, there are a few things that folks can do. So one thing that we've done is, while our members are currently exempt, we have actually worked out a partnership with a company called Wolters Kluwer, who can provide resources to folks and help them kind of navigate the process, make it a little bit easier for folks to understand when it does come down to filing, if that's something that they are then required to do. Seeking out companies like that, or folks who can provide resources, whether it's lawyers or accountants, that's probably the first step you need to do, is just to make sure, one, your folks are familiar with that, because in a lot of cases, lawyers and accountants aren't even familiar with this yet, or they're just
They're
getting
not.
familiar with it now. We had another one of our trustees who is a longtime lawyer out in the Ohio area, was telling us that he's in all these different lawyers groups, and they were coming back, and folks were telling him, "We've never heard of this. What do we do? What's the framework that we're supposed to be applying here?" And so he's
Right.
folks with that, but they're learning as much as anybody else is.
That was our experience in talking to our congressmen and women as well. They're like, what? Yeah, exactly.
And in a lot of cases, the members of Congress that we have now are not the same members of Congress who voted to pass this thing in the first place.
Right.
Not only was it the kind of thing that was inserted into thousands and thousands of pages of legislative text and kind of stuck in there, but it was also something that even the folks who were there voting on it then might not still be in Congress right now. So there's a big gap there between the folks who I think wanted to get this into law and the folks who are now kind of dealing with it.
Yeah.
But anywho, so back to compliance. So that is the main thing. Right now, anybody who is not a member of NSBA, again, as of that date before, does currently have to comply. But right now, the only compliance is for folks who are creating a new reporting entity this year. So it is new companies as of this year have to file, but it is not for existing companies yet. The reason why we've been fighting as hard as we have, and why we've been trying to make sure we get as much consideration of this, both on the court side and on the legislative side this year, is that in January 1 of this coming year, then it applies to everybody who has an existing business.
Right.
So that's the big deadline for us, when all of these millions of small business owners are going to potentially start to get caught up in it. That's the big date for us.
Yeah, and I mean, it's so just vague on exactly what you're supposed to do. So even if you have the goal of being compliant, you don't even necessarily know how to fill out the paperwork. If you're attempting, because I've got a lot of DIYers, right? A lot of us as small business owners and entrepreneurs especially are like, I can figure this out myself. But the reality is you're going to get this and you're going to be like, what am I even supposed to do here? Because it is so vague on exactly what it is that you're supposed to do. And it's definitely a big thing. I mean, I would definitely say one of the other things is, documenting your internal controls. I'm a very process oriented person. So just beginning to make sure that you've got an idea around what you do and who's involved in your business, and begin to kind of think through that, especially as we move forward and we see kind of how this whole thing pans out. And at the time of this episode actually airing, we just completed the big election season. And so another thing that I would definitely recommend, and one of the things that I enjoy most about being involved with NSBA, is being able to talk to our congressmen and women and say, this is something that's important to me. So, find out who is your representative in your area, reach out, tell them that the CTA is bull and I want you to address it, so that if they get enough of us complaining, that it might actually become something. And now that we've got kind of a new team, a new home team in place, they might actually be willing to listen. So I appreciate you kind of schooling us on what that means. And again, guys, we're going to include lots of links in the description below, resources, tools, information for you. So make sure that you check those out. And also information on how you can become a member of the NSBA in order to be more involved and to get yourself at least in the loop. It is an amazing organization. They do so much about keeping you informed. They send out, newsletters and information, and we have a annual, Washington presentation where we actually go out to the federal government and we talk about some of these issues. It's just a great opportunity for you to stay in the loop and to get involved. So let's talk a little bit and shift. I just want to make sure that we have a little bit of time to talk more about the broader policy environment for small businesses and entrepreneurs. What other pertinent federal policies do you think are really truly affecting us, including like the tax stuff and, all of those things that we've got going on, especially since we got a new team in the House? this? And how do you recommend that business owners can advocate more favorably for these types of additional, policies to be able to make those changes, and how they should really truly consider becoming involved through membership, even in their local chambers, but also most importantly with the NSBA when it comes to more federal stuff. So tell us a little bit about what else we got going on that we may not be aware of.
Yeah, happy to. So like you mentioned, 2025 is going to be a big tax year. So I'm sure folks remember back in 2017, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, frequently known as the Trump tax cut, was put into place. It changed basically every tax rate that folks would have to deal with, whether they are structured as a C corporation, a pass-through. It changed individual rates. It really changed everything across the board for everybody. And a lot of those provisions are going to be expiring at the end of 2025. So Congress only has this coming year to really sort that out and make sure that millions of Americans don't face an immediate tax hike. So that's what we are squarely focused on for this year. That's going to be kind of our biggest thing as we message to the new administration, new Congress as they come in and take office. Is that there are millions and millions of Americans here who are going to be caught out and are not prepared for major tax increases.
Right.
The big thing for us, I know so many small businesses are structured as pass-throughs in some way, shape, or form. And what they're able to do is take advantage of something called 199A right now, which is the Qualified Business Income Pass-Through Deduction. That is scheduled to go away. It's a very, very big provision that affects so many folks. If you are claiming that right now, without Congress's action, that will go away at the end of the year. And if Congress doesn't take action on a whole broader suite of tax issues, you're likely to end up paying a higher percentage on a larger portion of your income because individual rates are going to go up as well. So it's really a 1-2 punch that we are working really, really hard.
And we so appreciate that work. We so appreciate that work. And then aside from that too, I just want to make sure that I give clarity to folks who are like, I don't know if I'm a pass-through entity. Call your accountant and say, am I a pass-through entity? But most likely, if you are a partnership or you have a Schedule C that goes along with your individual income tax, then you are a pass-through entity. I can tell you right now, as an LLC, if you are a single member or even a multi-member, you are a pass-through entity. So just call your accountant to confirm, because I am not giving tax advice at all. But listen to what Reed is saying, because most likely it is going to impact so many of us. And he just said higher taxes. All right. So that's the key word there. Go right ahead. Sorry.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Yeah. That is exactly the kind of background I think folks need here. So yeah, that is our big concern right now, is that without Congress taking action, the administration taking action, there's going to be a massive tax increase for just about everybody in the country. And that's a really concerning prospect for us. So we're doing everything we can to make sure that folks are paying attention to that they're aware of that, and that they work to some sort of solution before the end of the year, so that we have clarity going into 2026 to make sure that folks don't have those huge hikes. Beyond that, also in that same tax space, I'm sure folks who are high innovation small businesses are familiar with the 174 research and deduction. So beyond just the 199 qualified business income pass-through deduction for folks, there's a lot of other things that are going to be at stake in this tax bill. For those high innovation small businesses, there's something called 174, which is in the research and deduction space. Folks should know about that. That is actually already lapsed, unfortunately, but we're doing everything we can to make sure that lawmakers include that as part of whatever broader package they're putting together. There are also things like bonus depreciation and things like that affect a lot of folks, but have been getting kind of overlooked in broader tax discussions. We're doing everything we can to make sure that that's part of this final conversation. So we are really trying to make sure that everything we do, Congress understands is really what small businesses need to keep their heads above water, to keep things moving, to keep innovating, to keep the main streets of every town and city that they're in running, because without this kind of support, small businesses cannot thrive, and we need to make sure we're thriving, because like I was saying before, small businesses are over 99% of all private firms in the United States. We are huge, guys. I know everybody feels like, oh, they're just maybe one business out of millions, but we are massive. We're a whole community that really does drive the national economy. So anything that folks can do to really help insert their voice into this process, please do. We've got resources on our website. We've got these things called action alerts. Whether or not you're a member of NSBA, you are more than welcome to come onto our website and fill one of these out. Then we've got specific ones dealing with these tax issues. You can fill those out, send those to your members of Congress, both your senators and your representative in your local area. They'll know what you're trying to get across. They'll see what you're supporting, and you'll be adding your voice to this chorus from NSBA members and small businesses across the country in support of common sense tax reform.
And I think that was the prevailing and a perfect transition, because I think that the biggest takeaway that I want everybody to keep in mind is that it just as important as when you are as functioning as an individual and you recognize that your vote is equivalent to your voice. Oftentimes, as small business owners, we don't realize that we also have to have a voice. We have to speak up on behalf of what affects our livelihood and our ability to build empires and our ability to leave a legacy for our children. And that's why I am so passionate about public policy and being involved in advocacy, because it goes beyond just coming up with the right products and services to make sure that we're, meeting the needs of our target audience and taking care of pain points and challenges. That's a part of the reason why we became entrepreneurs, because we like solving problems. And you don't necessarily always think about the problems that you're facing just because you are an entrepreneur. And that is why membership in organizations like NSBA and your local chamber that has an advocacy arm or division or component is so important. You may not want to be the one that's out there marching on Washington. I totally get it, right? You might be thinking I'm too busy for that. But by being members, keeping yourself abreast of it, you are giving voice. And then ultimately making sure that everybody knows how you feel about it. Because if you stay quiet, you're just sitting there saying, I guess I'm okay with it, without even saying, I guess I'm okay with it. And that's what I think is the biggest takeaway from all of this. And I know that this conversation today might feel a little scary, and it should. Quite frankly, I'm a keep it real kind of girl, y'all. So it should feel scary, especially if this is brand new news for you. You should be a little scared. And that should be your sign to say, let me figure out what's going on. So again, Reed has been amazing at making sure that we will have all the links to all the stuff that he has discussed today in the description below. I will also make sure that it is pinned in the comment, but we want to hear what questions you have. So please make sure that if you've got questions and you want clarification, if I don't know the answer or someone from Team CP doesn't know the answer, we will get the answer for you, or at least be able to give you some insight. But I think that the National Small Business Association's website is amazing. It is a wealth of knowledge and information. So just take an hour, and instead of just scrolling aimlessly through social media, spend some time reading on what's affecting you, because we've got this going on right now with the Corporate Transparency Act. But as Reed just mentioned, in 2025, we have several new mountains to climb when it comes
Absolutely.
to
And
what's
you
going
know
on.
what? If I can make folks feel a little bit better, there is a little bit of good news in all of this, which is that lawmakers are listening to us. They do care what small businesses are telling them. So, as I mentioned before, NSBA was basically the first group to go out there saying, hey, we got a problem with the Corporate Transparency Act. Well, since then, folks have been paying attention. In the last 2 years now, we've had 6 different bills introduced in Congress to help deal with the Corporate Transparency Act in some way, shape, or form, whether it's complete repeal or it's making modifications, all things that our small business owners are calling for. On the tax side, we've got bills that have been introduced over the past year that deal with every one of the provisions I've talked about. There's the Main Street Tax Certainty Act, which would deal with 199A, making sure that's permanent for folks. A lot of the other pieces that we talked about before, and a lot more besides, have been included in that bipartisan tax compromise that became such a big part of the news cycle this year. Yep. While that is passed this year, we're hoping that that's going to end up being the bedrock of whatever deal comes out next year. So while it is really scary and there's a lot of stuff going on that really should be unsettling to folks, let me tell you, there's a lot of good news too. Our lawsuit is working through. We're expecting a decision in the appeal coming up here in the not too distant future, the first little bit of December here. And then we're making sure we're working that legislative angle as well, and the tax side is also taken care of. So just make sure that you are staying engaged. Make sure that you do reach out to folks, because this type of momentum can go away so easily if we don't really have this mass of folks behind us. So thank you, Cheryl, for everything you're doing for directing folks to both, not just to us, but to their local chambers of commerce and their local small business advocacy groups as well, because it really does matter at every single level of government, guys. It really does.
And I can't speak on behalf of every single small business owner in the country, but I am going to take that on right now and say thank you, because many of us don't even know that we've got an organization like NSBA and our small business caucuses around our local areas and our chambers fighting for us in a way that really matters for our everyday. And I know that your job sometimes puts you in a space, because we've talked about this, where you are working around the clock for us. And so I'm, on behalf of everyone, even though I have haven't been given the authority vested in me, like I'm an officiant in a wedding, I'm going to say thank you. Thank you so much for doing the work that you do. Thank you so much for being so knowledgeable. And thank you so much for just being in this space where you have made it a passion and a priority for you, and not just your job, but what you do every single day is with small business at heart. And so I congratulate you for doing an amazing job, but also really humbly from my heart and from the heart of everybody who I work with and on CPTV, and then entrepreneurs who just I talk to every day. I want you to know that it matters, and the work that you do, the late nights that you put in, the time that you spend away from your family, and that work-life balance that we all try so hard to maintain. Giving that up for all of us does not go unnoticed. And so thank you so much. And thank you for
Thank you.
being here with me today and giving us that clarity, because I didn't just want to do an episode where I'm like trying to make sure that I'm talking about it. I wanted to make sure I brought in the big guns, because I knew there was going to be some stuff I wasn't going to really be too sure about how to address. And I wanted to make sure that we can focus on that. And I plan on making sure that we continue beyond this episode to highlight what's happening as I continue to stay involved with NSBA, but also, working with my local chamber and Cozy and all of those folks, so that we can continue to let all small business owners know that it is important for you to be aware of what's going on. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. It has been such a pleasure. Really appreciate it. We'll do our best to make sure that, like I was saying before, everybody gets all the information that they need. If anybody has any questions, we'll make sure you have some points of contact to reach out to. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for everything you do.
And before you leave, just give a shout out. What is the NSBA's website so that everybody can check it out? If they don't know how to go into the description below, where should everybody go for information?
Absolutely. So we are at nsbaadvocate.org. That is our banner. Feel free to reach out to us there. I believe we have that on social media as well.
Yep.
We're active on just about everything across from LinkedIn to
Instagram,
Twitter, whatever Facebook. That is. Now, we run the gamut
on everything.
Yep,
absolutely. So you guys heard it. And again, all the links to everything that you can possibly need in order to be able to get yourself up to speed with what's going on will be in the description, but you can also check it out on nsbaadvocate.org. And then they are also on all of the social media platforms. And again, if you got any questions, comments, concerns, or any ideas or feedback that you would like to share, please make sure you put it in the comments below, because that is a wrap on today's discussion about the Corporate Transparency Act and how it impacts your business. With the important deadlines looming, now is time to make sure that you are aware of what's going on, how it impacts you, stay informed, and protect the future of your company. And understanding federal policies is the key to growing your business while avoiding costly missteps. But most importantly, I hope that you got a clearer picture from CTA about CTA and the other tax issues that are looming for us. Make sure that you hit the like button, subscribe to CPTV, and turn on notifications for more insights. And remember, if you've got questions, let us know. And until next time, my loves, again, thank you so much, Reed, for being here. Bye-bye. Mwah!
Thanks so much.
You an entrepreneur.